Okay, you're now live.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our February 1st Town Council meeting. In lieu of Pledge of Allegiance, maybe if we could just take a moment to be silent, reflect. Okay, thank you. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Labriella?
Here.
Mr. Prickett? Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Moffett?
Here.
Dr. Parker?
I'm here, but I'm there.
Ms. Tillerson?
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We have two sets of minutes under tab 1 and tab 2. The first of the minutes is of the January 11th meeting. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion, comments? I had shared a few with Petra yesterday. Any others?
No, Mayor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And the second is our special call meeting on January the 13th. Again, could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, mayor's comments. First of all, I apologize for all of this. And I thank everybody for being so cooperative to have the Zoom meeting. So sorry about that. When they say this thing is an inconvenience or a nuisance, I'm not sure what they're absolutely referring to. It's miserable. So the key to this virus is not to get it, for sure. Thank God we have these vaccines. I have a number of comments to make. One, we completed in January, it was a busy month. We completed our 3-day planning retreat. I thought it was a very successful retreat. I clearly thanked the staff and it was impressed upon the staff, their work, their presentation, their slide presentations. They were very informative. I think we on the council learned a great deal about what they have done and what their plans to do in 2022. And there's clearly an expectation that 2022 will be a busy year. It's starting off that way. The first session of the planning retreat dealt with the proposed changes to the annexation and zoning ordinance. It too was a productive meeting, very constructive. Stephanie and Joe were well prepared and we went through the 15 points that had been highlighted by the community in terms of asking us to consider making changes, modifications to that. Since then, there was a follow-up meeting, which was held last week with Stephanie and members of the community. I understand it too is a constructive and a positive meeting, and we're all working towards now our next Tuesday meeting at 10 o'clock, the February 8th workshop. And again, it will be very similar to the one that we had on January the 11th. We should be reviewing drafts of changes, suggested changes that Stephanie and Joe will be presenting, incorporating the thoughts and comments that we've all been reviewing. I think one of the most important will be to see the extent to which we proceed down the path of an ordinance or we proceed down the path of a policy, as we saw in that Bluffton example. So that's next Tuesday at 10. Hopefully, at the conclusion of that, we will be able to have some more substantive information that we'll be able to share with the community at large, and then have that prepared for the February 22nd meeting, which will really be in the format of the town hall. So I'd really like to be able to give the community ample opportunity to be reviewing changes, suggested changes, reactions to all of this, see what course we're going to be taking, give them an opportunity to either present in person or at least by mail what their thoughts are. In addition, last week I had a meeting with Mark Pamar. on the Beachwalker development proposal. Mark shared the feedback that he had been receiving from the numerous community meetings that he had held, the prior 2-3 weeks. And he had, I forget exactly how many, 6, 7, 8 meetings with a number of different groups. He shared that with me in terms of what the comments, concerns expressed by the community. I don't mean to. There were a lot of comments, a lot of concerns, but they seem to focus around 3. Height of building. Number one, a lot of people obviously would not like to see that happen. But Mark, it included in that slide package that he presented to the group and that he showed to me last week, which was really the first time that I had seen it. He had laid out the entitlements that the developers were that were available to the developer by virtue of owning these properties, and had the buildings lined up on, I think it was 11, parcel 11. So he really showed that in terms of the first slide of really what the entitlements to the developer were. So one was height, one was density, and then the third dealt with concerns that the community had relative to traffic. So at this point, he's taking those comments and concerns back to the developer, and we'll wait to hear from them. But the one area I wanted to point out so that we can memorialize it in our notes today is the concern that the community had expressed relative to traffic and a traffic study. And I think that had been missed by some. We, the town, did commission a traffic study. It really is now almost 6 months, 5 months ago, this last fall, for the entire area, which is certainly to include this parcel. And that the traffic study that we undertook did not consider only the developed property, it considered the developed and the undeveloped property. And in the case of the undeveloped property, it took into account what their entitlements were or what the zoning requirements would have been. So the traffic study should be comprehensive. And anyway, I think we will remind the community of that, with our notes. As it turns out, coincidentally, next month will be 6 months since we undertook that study, and John Taylor and Kimberly Horn are scheduled for a presentation, a status report at that time. So those were just some comments that I wanted to make. Citizen comments.
Mayor, what we'll do to make this easier, if any citizens have any comments related to anything that's on the agenda, please raise your hand and Ms. Braswell will admit you in to ask your question.
Mr. Hennessy?
Good afternoon. You hear me?
I can.
Yes.
So I just would like, first of all, thank you for the format here is so much better. Now you can have interaction with members of the community. So to the communication staff, a big thank you. Appreciate your doing that. I just had a comment regarding the first new business item, the Kiowa Island utility rate increase. I'm not a utility expert, and I know that this rate increase is subject to a rigorous regulatory review, as it should be. However, Kiowa Island Utility is owned by a chain of private entities. Ultimately, I think it's part of an infrastructure fund. And I guess having dealt with private equity and infrastructure funds for much of my professional career, I just bring a little bit of skepticism in terms of their motivations. So I don't know whether the town has the inherent technical skills to review and, if appropriate, challenge this rate increase, or whether we're relying on the state and the utility commission. But I think such things as distributions to, fees paid to the ownership, as well as the condition of the maintenance that's been done. These are very, very tricky analyses that need to be done to properly assess the rate increase. So my only comment is I have a very high regard for the staff of Toki, and I have no reason to think that the state commission isn't also very skilled. But I think this is a very, very important rate case, and I hope whatever technical assistance the town needs to have to feel confident to make a proper assessment, it obtains. It would be money well spent if necessary. Thank you. That's my only comment.
Okay, is there anyone else out of the attendees who would like to talk? If so, please use your raise hand option. Seeing none.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Mayor?
Okay, let's go to new business. Specific to the comment that we just heard, Stephanie, are you going to introduce Jack? Is he online? Who's going to be talking about this petition to intervene?
Thank you. Yes, Mayor and members of council, Jack Pringle. The town has commissioned Mr. Pringle to help us with this process. We did something similar, I believe back in 2017 when KIU had another rate increase. We commissioned and hired an attorney that is very familiar with rate cases. And so we have reached out to Mr. Pringle, who is also familiar with this process, to help us along the way. And what you have before you is actually a copy of the petition to intervene that he's filed on our behalf. And I will go ahead and turn it over to him to let him give an update.
Thank you, Stephanie, and Mr. Mayor and council members. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jack Pringle. Hey there. I'll jump right into the comment that Mr. Hennessy had, which was a good one, and then we'll describe the request before the commission and what's taking place. Mr. Hennessy is correct that Kiowa Island Utility is now ultimately owned by a company called Southwest Water that has operations in a number of states and may very well get some of its funding from a particular infrastructure fund. In part because of its ultimate ownership by Southwest, and Southwest owns a couple of other systems in South Carolina too, these rate cases are receiving even more scrutiny by other state agencies than they have in the past. Those of you who recall previous rate cases that KIU had most recently in 2018 or 17 and 18 and early 19 will recall that the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff plays a pretty significant role in these cases. It's their job, the ORS's job, to audit and assess a rate case request and send data requests to the applicant, offer their own view of the world through pre-filed testimony, and then have witnesses who appear at the hearing. In addition, because of recent changes in the statutory scheme, the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs, also known as the Consumer Advocate, is also a party in this case. with the right to conduct discovery and present witnesses. What this means in this case particularly is that both the Department of Consumer Affairs and the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff are playing an active role. Those parties, and particularly, I'll just give you an example, the Office of Regulatory Staff has sent, I think it's on the order of 11 discovery requests to KIU right now, at least at this point in the game, seeking more information about their request, specifically seeking information, and Mr. Hennessy mentioned this, about any affiliate relationship that the utility has with its parent company and with its owners, with an eye towards making sure that, you know, only those things that are attributable to the utility are contained within that utility. And I mentioned that process specifically because, at least in recent years, and specifically within the last couple of years, both the ORS and the Department of Consumer Affairs have taken particularly active roles in questioning the rate case request and providing witnesses, for example, that take issue with the utility with respect to issues like rate of return and expenses and the like. And I would expect that both those state agencies would do that here again. I won't go into this in detail, but Southwest also owns a company called Palmetto Wastewater Reclamation that just had a rate case and those entities came in and worked hard to try to mitigate or lower that rate request. So there are some fairly technical issues and involved issues. And I think there will definitely be a role for the town to play in that process, whether it would be necessarily sponsoring a witness on those technical issues. I have some opinions on that based upon what's already taking place, but I think it will be important, and not only in providing testimony, which would be due at the end of this month, but also having as many residents who have concerns about the increase or opinions about the utility or just want to appear. The commission has scheduled several different sessions for a virtual public hearing to allow individuals to testify, as well as the actual merits hearing on the case, where we'll get to the opportunity to present evidence and testimony. I'll pause there for a second. I do think that what I want to convey is that there is a lot of heavy analysis that's taking place with respect to every aspect of this rate case. And I've been in touch with the Office of Regulatory Staff and have had conversations with it about its concerns about the application and ways in which the town, could support that effort and or offer its own views of how the utility is doing, as well as the amount of the rate increase and how what kinds of things, for example, the town would like to see the utility doing that it is not doing right now for its residents. So I'll pause just for a second and see if there's any particular feedback there, and I can talk more specifically about the application, if that makes sense.
Mayor or anybody, do you guys have any specific questions right now, or would you like Mr. Pringle to move forward?
I have one quick question, which is in this public comment virtual meetings that are occurring in which individual residents are encouraged to attend. What what does that format look like? I mean, what could, if a resident were to virtually attend, what would they expect to produce? What would they expect to challenge? What would they expect to be challenged about, depending upon what they would say?
That's a good question. As a general proposition, a resident is allowed to say whatever he or she would like to say about their experience with the utility. Generally, the utility has an opportunity to respond to something that an individual says in a public hearing. Typically, that a response doesn't take place. Most often it doesn't take place unless a resident comes in and says, I've done a study of the water, the drinking water here, and, this and that, because it is something that they might be hearing for the first time. And you're not subject to cross-examination in the same way that you would be if you were an actual witness in a case. It's mostly that you do have the opportunity for the commissioners to ask you questions in that virtual hearing. And usually it's sort of just follow up. But as a general proposition, you can say, offer up whatever that opinion might be about the utility and its operations and the rate case adjustment request.
Okay, so it's just an opinion and anecdotal information that is usually offered by the residents, as opposed to, as you said, I've done a formal study and there's too much lead in the water. I'm just making stuff up now. But,
Sure. And
along that sort of stuff.
Right. But what's interesting is that the commission and our Supreme Court has held that the commission can consider the evidence that is presented by those public witnesses or those who talk. But it gets a little bit more problematic if it becomes, just a throughway for somebody to try to offer expert testimony. I mean, I think what resonates most with the commissioners in my experience, it really is, just personal observations about service or, where the utility is going or how responsive they are, or just to get a different sense than the sense you get when you're just talking about numbers and dollars and cents.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jack, your comfort level, you ask these other agencies or these entities specific to the organizational and financial hierarchy of this company. Do they have the technical experience to deal with that? I mean, are there that many companies like Southwest that are part of larger, conglomerates that are part of private equity firms and things like that, or that they can look at that as compared to just a water, a utility?
Oh, sure. I understand your question, and I don't know what it looks like in other contexts, and the way that different organizations might evaluate it. But the reason I know that they're at least somewhat adept at it is that they've now been doing it in several different rate cases, and that's why I mentioned that Palmetto Waste Reclamation. I mean, which is also owned by Southwest, where they're asking those specific questions about, well, wait a minute, there are certain common expenses, are they not? Or, that there are overheads and things that these companies share. How are those allocated? How are those split up? How can you justify, putting some in the basket that are specific to this utility as opposed to something that applies at the top level or to other affiliates? And they've also done the same sort of analysis with, for example, you may have heard this name, Blue Granite Water Company, which is also owned, and as part of, I don't want to say the term conglomerate necessarily, but certainly a collection of companies. So their ability and knowledge about dealing with those types of transactions and they certainly have experience in it and take a very close look at that in order to make sure that South Carolina ratepayers, or in this instance, town of Kiowa ratepayers, aren't footing the bill for, common and shared types of expenses.
Okay, any other comments from council before Jack moves on? Doesn't look like. Okay, go ahead, Jack.
Well, and I think the areas where we may be able to, and we can talk, more specifically about this, there are some particular areas of the application where some expenses associated with you all may have certainly heard about this sort of a redundant second water line that was being installed that was going sort of between, and I'm going to get the geography wrong, but a little bit Kiowa and Johns Island. And there was some litigation that took place because of a ruptured pipe. And there's an element of the rate case that is seeking to recover some of the what was incurred in that situation, in that lawsuit. And that was one particular area where it may be that having some input, particularly from the town, would be helpful. Another would be to, just the observations on some of the things that the company has been doing, the replacement of using smart meters, or that particular program, how well that's working. And there's a number of other things that I would characterize as sort of at the margin, where there may be the opportunity to provide some context and to some pushback necessarily on what the company is asking for, and also to weigh in on this. It has been roughly 3 years since their last rate case application. That is not terribly atypical for some of the larger companies or the larger systems to come in on about that, that sort of time frame. So I can't say that I'm necessarily surprised. I know for all of you as residents, it seems like they were just before the commission, and that there may be some things that are kind of inherently unfair and coming in on the heels of a pandemic and everything else. But that having been said, it's not out of the ordinary to see these happen every 3 years or so. And I think that's become more of, particularly when a company is being operated by a larger or a national group, is that they'll want to have rate cases more regularly because, among other things, it reflects their current financial reality. And it is one other point to make. I mean, their application does describe that they've made any number of upgrades and investments in the system, and all other things being equal, they're entitled to have rate recovery for that. And so, to the extent that the town has an opinion on how well those improvements, those investments are playing out in the town, I think that's also helpful to give the commission, some context.
Jack, just a question on the redundant line. And we can, I guess we'll talk about this later, but during the sale, and I don't mean have to go back through the specific dates of all of this, but during the sale from the partner, from the developer to Southwest, that redundant line was underway. We have no idea in terms of the sell price, purchase price of the asset itself, how that was taken into account, number one. Number two, there was a rupture. We certainly knew that. I guess we knew or heard of there was going to be litigation, but I don't know, Stephanie, or if you recall, we weren't privy to any of the numbers, what they settled for. I have no idea how much of it was insured or anything like that. So it is brought up on page 415, from Becky's testimony. But some of that stuff, I don't know, do we have access to it, or will we get access, or that's part of the question. And how much of that cost are they embedding into, that would have been part of the 17 rate increase, I would have thought, as compared to this 21 rate increase.
Well, those are great questions. And I think they're included now because I believe the resolution of that litigation was subsequent to that particular rate case. But we do have access to that a lot of that information about that case and its resolution. More than you'd want to read, believe me. But although the Office of Regulatory Staff and the Consumer Advocate are certainly looking at that very closely, but we can certainly share and talk about exactly what was involved. I think for purposes of this, it's actually mentioned on, and I did not, I don't think, share the actual rate case application as part of this, but they specifically mentioned that they additional incremental pipeline costs in the amount of $2.37 million. That's in the application, and that essentially is, and what they're showing here is, and it's redacted, and we'll sign a confidentiality agreement and see that number, but what they're asking for in this case is to include, and the way it would show up is expenses that are depreciated, not a 2.37 million, but those some amount of that resolution be considered plant or assets that are used and useful that are then depreciated. And that's a point of contention. And it's certainly something that is, and I don't know this for absolute certain, but I know I'm confident it's going to be a point of contention for the state agencies as we move forward on the case, because what it does as a practical matter is it ends up bumping up because they're an operating margin company and not a rate of return company, right. It ends up bumping up their annual or the depreciation by somewhere in the neighborhood of about $50,000, I think. And that's somewhat significant in terms of an operating margin, which is really just revenues over expenses in terms of recovering.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the
Jack.
purpose of today, Jack, was to share all of this, share your progress, get feedback from the council. And then what? And then next step, but you don't need anything necessarily from us per se.
Not right this second, but just, I think, be considering, my recommendation is that in view of the skirmishing that is going to be taking place between the applicant and the other state agencies on things on like cost, on affiliate transactions, on some of that idea of whether that's an appropriate expense or whether that's properly considered. And there's a host of other issues too, that the sort of overarching one of the issues is whether this company ought to be a rate of return based company rather than an operating margin. As a general proposition, operating margin is the appropriate way to be regulated when you've depreciated all of your assets. And this company, certainly has, lots of assets that are still being depreciated. But putting that aside, I think my recommendation is to have a discussion about whether or not we consider presenting, someone as a witness and filing some brief testimony later on this month that touches touches on some of these issues in a fairly particular way, or whether or not the focus is on giving lots of residents the opportunity to offer up their public testimony, and then having the opportunity to cross-examine the party's witnesses at the hearing. Along with that, I know that there will likely be, and we'll have to see what everybody's appetite for this is. The last rate case was resolved via a stipulation, which is still happens some. It's not happening as much as it used to, and it may be that some issues are resolved and others aren't, and they're not willing. But to consider whether or not, with some concessions that might have to do with some of these expenses that would mitigate the rate case, the effects of the rates, whether the town would be willing to look at resolving this with the applicant. Oftentimes that might involve not just, your rates will be lower than what you asked for, but sometimes they involve, you might agree, you applicant, you agree that you won't come in for 4 years the next time you come in, or you take certain actions. They did a cost of service study before this rate case, and that will be an issue to some extent. So cost of service, meaning to try to balance out and figure out where costs should be allocated as time goes on. So, but that would be another option, is to think about what kinds of things the town might want KIU to be doing now or in the future that they're not doing, and that they perhaps could be doing better. So it's kind of a collection of things, but just something to think about over the next couple of weeks.
Well, that was quite a laundry list of things to think about. Can you summarize those?
Yeah, well, summarize is to ask, the scheduling, would have us, if we wanted to file testimony, if we wanted to present a witness, we would need to file that testimony by the 24th of this month. Today's the 1st. Right now, it's, and again, I'm subject to, love to hear thoughts on this about whether it makes sense to sponsor a witness to say something different from what residents could say, but we certainly could. And that would be to, are we going to do a witness? Are there issues that are pressing with residents that I don't know about, that the ORS doesn't already know about? And they certainly want to know if there are things that are going on right now that would be helpful to them, because they have to file testimony the same day too. So do we present a witness? Are there concerns that, have not been raised? And then 3, what kinds of things would we like to see the utility do that they're not doing right now? And I think that sort of sums it up.
Just so that I'm clear, and anybody that's watching is also clear, that at the end of the day, no matter what we posit, don't posit, witness, don't witness, the decision is ultimately at the state regulatory level.
That is correct. It's at the South Carolina Public Service Commission.
Right.
7 commissioners will make that decision after they have heard all the evidence.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure my email inbox doesn't blow up when the state regulators make a decision.
Oh, sure. That's their job. And that's what, they have faced, any number of relatively, and not to say politically difficult, but difficult rate cases over the last several years. And this one won't be any exception.
Thank you.
Well, my understanding is Craig made direct testimony in the 2017 case. So, we can clearly follow your advice. If you think that is of merit, would be of value, can consider doing that again
Mhm.
this time.
Sure.
In terms of the public comment, we would always encourage public comment. So I don't see any hesitancy in terms of maybe create the criteria, what the public would be commenting on, as you say, improvement of services or assessment of services or whatever, but I don't see why we would not wish to do that. And
That's a great point. And I do think, you might consider whether there's a way, and I don't know where, I can never say where we'll be in the pandemic by that point, but to, perhaps consider providing a forum or at least a place where, in the same way as if they were coming to the commission, they could come to a place that has a microphone and a camera and present their comments in a pretty, regular fashion. So it wouldn't be too hard for people to log in and everything. I don't know whether you could do something like that at the town hall or something and say, look, here's where, you've all signed up. If you sign up, you can present them virtually this way. Now, of course, you can go to the commission in Columbia to do it too, but that will be available virtually.
we've done that in the past. I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it again.
Yeah.
And then the third was that dealt with the stipulation. That was your comment.
Yeah, I would expect, and I don't know this to be sure.
Yeah, I guess it's premature to.
It may be, but I would expect, if history is any guide, to be asked the question.
Yeah.
Because again, sometimes, and in that's Palmetto wastewater reclamation is a good example. The parties stipulated to a number of things that they weren't going to argue about at the hearing, and then went to the hearing and argued about the rate of return on equity. And so in that instance, then you're thinking about, well, what would it take in order to resolve, to make the town relatively happy or less upset with the rate increase.
Okay. Well, council members, any other comments? Scott, John, Mary Ann?
I'm good.
Mayor, I'm not sure if Mr. Pringle will stay on with us. So there might be comments from the community or questions, if you will allow that now, kind of going out of order, because I know he's going to pop off.
They're appearing now, Stephanie?
Stephanie, do you have anyone that's raised their hands to ask any follow-up questions with regards to this particular topic?
I have Mr. Todd Boney. I'll allow him to talk and he can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Todd?
Hey, Jack, just one quick question. And again, I'm a CFO by background, so apologize if I'm getting wonky here, but if it's an operating margin target for the utility, isn't there less incentive for them to invest in infrastructure compared to a rate of return target?
You raise a very interesting point, and I think that's why I mentioned that the operating margin is the best fit for a company that doesn't actually have or has a depreciated rate base or a donated or lots of SEAC, if you will, contributions in aid of. I made it so far without doing any acronyms, and then I just sort of fell into it. But I think you're right. There are instances where that could be the case, and I think that's an approach that's being taken here. Is, well, wait a minute, hold on. With all of these, this plan and service that you have, and all of these assets, shouldn't that be presented in a way where you actually have a rate base that's, on which you can actually make a return? I think Southwest and KIU's response would be, well, as our application demonstrates, we are making investments in the system, and we have chosen to recover those investments by, through depreciation expense, in a different way. I mean, we have a rate base, but the operating margin, allows us to, it still allows us, and I don't know whether it necessarily encourages us, but we are doing it. But that's a great point. And I think that there will be a fair amount of discussion about, well, wait a minute, if isn't it, I don't know what the right metaphor is, but you using the operating margin, isn't that, a little bit off given all the plan and service that you have and that is not fully depreciated. And, actually you look more like a rate of return rate-based company than an operating margin company.
And Jack, for the other utilities that are under this umbrella organization, are they rate of return or are they operating margin?
That's a great question. And that's a particular question that the Office of Regulatory Staff and the Consumer Advocate have asked, not just about their companies, but about their witnesses in this case. How are you doing it in your other jurisdictions? And so that's.
And Jack, is that, and I apologize, so we're not
No.
getting into too many details that are going to bore people, but is that an election that the utility made when it was owned by the partners, or was that an election that was made when they bought the business?
Actually, they've been operating margins since before Southwest owned them.
Okay.
And that was my first question too. When I saw this, I thought, well, wait a minute, because the other side of that, and this I promise to everybody else that we won't stay on this, is that in the last couple of rate cases that the commission have been rate of return companies, and the fight over rate of return on equity has been knocked down, drag out, and including up to the South Carolina Supreme Court. So my first thought was, oh, wait a minute, aren't these companies wanting to be operating margin to avoid that ROE fight? But it does appear that traditionally they've been operating margin.
Yeah, I would just encourage the town to consider this when you're looking at what positions you want to take, because with an operating margin target, if they wanted to, they could cut back on their investment in the community, and they would still be able to receive the same rate of return. And I would suspect, and you could talk to Jack about this offline, that there would be more incentive for the utility to invest if it was a rate of return concept. But I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie, is there anyone else that raised their hand on this topic?
No.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Jack. I know after this, you may have to pop off, but thank you. So
Yeah.
Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Jack. I guess we'll get back in touch.
Yeah, we'll be talking.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council before? Okay.
No,
All
Mayor.
right. Good. Item B, to consider approval of a land lease agreement with KIU. And Stephanie, are you going to handle this, or is Joe?
Joe, he's on.
Yes, hi. We've been working on this lease, which seems should be easy, but there have been some details regarding the insurance that we need to carry on the property as required by the landlord, KIU, ironically enough. And those details on what kind of insurance we have to carry, we thought we had them hammered out, but well, we don't. I mean, there are some very, very minor details about provisions in the policies. And so what I'd like to do is carry this over to the next council meeting to give us time to hammer out these last few details.
So would that be a tabling?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you give us a sense of, you say they're minor details. Can you just give us just a sense of what when you say minor, what that means?
They want, they want a, They want the carrier to waive subrogation, the insurance carrier to waive subrogation, which honestly, I have not seen the policies. We could not get copies of the policies until it was bound. I'm still waiting to see that. And then the other thing they wanted was that the policy would be primary. And I think that was the two main issues.
Sorry I asked, but thank you.
Pardon?
I said, I'm sorry I asked, but thank you. I didn't understand a word of what you said.
I'm sorry. They are very esoteric provisions within insurance policies.
Okay.
But Joe, in either case, in your own judgment, you would rather just delay this for a month rather than having it effectively approved pending your acceptance and Stephanie's and my review?
Well, honestly, I'm on a fence. It could probably be fine either way. It's just we don't have the exact final.
I understand. But I'm with Scott. This is probably way over, my understanding of these technical insurance issues. If you think they're minor, I don't want to.
They are minor, well, except that it could raise the cost of the insurance that we have to pay for.
I would
I
suggest
recommend
if
that
we're not complete, we ought not approve it.
Right. I
Yeah,
agree.
for that reason.
And for that reason, I'll motion to table this until the next meeting when we have the information needed to make a lease agreement with Kiowa Island Utility.
I would
Second.
that.
Okay. Any other comments?
There's no discussion when you make a motion to table, just go straight to the vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. See you next month, Joe.
Okay.
Item C, the beach patrol contract.
And thank you, Mayor. I believe Mr. Harris, can you turn your video on and introduce this?
Yes. Good afternoon.
Hi, Craig.
Hey, so give you guys just a small background. So the town posted an RFP to be for beach patrol and code enforcement services. The town received only one bid proposal, which was the Barry Island Ocean Rescue. The staff worked with representative from the Barry Island Ocean Rescue to discuss proposal amount and working hours in great length. So after discussion with both representatives and town administrator, I respectfully request that the town treat the contracts with Barry Island Ocean Rescue separately.
Right.
I'm sorry. Oh, I thought somebody said something. And this, I support that we move forward the new contract for beach patrol services and make no changes to the current code enforcement contract, but only amend the current contract for 1 year, which expires on February 2023. This option is better for myself as being new in this position, giving more time to do a extensive view of code enforcement in-house as well as after hours. So we met and decided to go with the option 2, which was at $584,000 compared to the actual proposal for both contracts at the time was $1,195,283. I'm sorry, $195,280. I'm sorry.
I would support this request, and one of the I was participated in some of the discussion on this, but one of the main things is the work that our code enforcement people do is really important, and it's something that's recognized by our residents as trying to help execute a lot of the requirements we have. And I think because it was new last year, it's really would help if Craig has the time to see exactly what are the issues and what are the timeframes for service that we are currently providing. Is it all night? Is it all day? Whatever. He needs to be able to collect that information and make some intelligent recommendations on the code enforcement services. For the beach patrol, there's been very few changes to their contract. So that was one of the reasons why we discussed moving forward with beach patrol and code enforcement separately.
So Craig, if I understand this correctly, you're asking that we approve the beach component of this for $584,000 according to the option 2 schedule, and then effectively extend the existing code enforcement contract for a year. Is that
Yes, sir.
simply? That's
Yes,
simply
sir.
what you're asking.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Are Michael and Rob on the call?
Yes, they are. Michael
I-
and Rob, could you please join? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, Mike and Rob. I had sent Mike a note yesterday. The increase for the beach patrol is $265,000 from the existing to the proposed option 2. And were you able to get some more specific detail you can share with us, Michael, in terms of the makeup of that $265,000?
Yes, sir. What we were able to do is mostly in percentages, just because of the way that we have the contracts worked out. One of the things we looked at was the increase in the amount of labor. The wage rate has gone up from 2017, when this contract was last bid, until now, has seen a 42% increase. The equipment and vehicle costs have gone up roughly 45% in terms of the amount and type of equipment and vehicles we need. One of the additions we made during the duration of the 2017 contract was to become DHEC certified as a rapid responder agency, which with that includes some additional equipment costs, because we have to carry the equipment that DHEC requires us. And that equipment does need upkeep. We also have some inflationary costs of about 43% of things like recruiting, retaining employees because of the nature of staffing right now. Training costs have gone up because we're not retaining employees as much as we were. And we also have seen just general expenses go up. One of the easiest things to point to is fuel costs. Another one would be things like life jackets. Our wholesalers can't get them to us anymore. So where we used to be able to buy those for $75, we now have to go to a retail outlet and buy them for over $200. So things like that are what has increased the price to that amount. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, those are significant increases.
I would also note, Mr. Mayor, if you looked at their statistics in terms of the work product that they're producing over the last 2 years, I mean, it has just exploded in terms of the number of times in which they've had to intervene at the beach patrol.
Of course. Of the cost elements, whether it's wages, equipment, inflation, or just the additional staffing for the expanded work year, which makes up the bulk of it?
Wages.
I would think wages.
Much, but hands down wages.
Okay. Any other questions comments from town council? Now, again, this is for the beach patrol contract only. And it is going to be what we're calling option 2 at $584,000, increased from $320,000. It'll be a 3-year contract.
Yes.
Yes. So I would move that we vote to accept this option 2 beach patrol contract at $584,000.
Okay, okay. Can I have a second?
Would
please?
second. I would second.
Any other discussion? When we talk about, just another question, Rob and Mike, when we talk about extending the code enforcement for a year, next year, when we renew it, but they'll be continue to be separate, or do you think we'll be able to meld them together next year after Craig's had a chance to assess them for a period of time? What's the plan for next year? Have you thought about
I
it?
don't think that Rob and Sas can answer that, Mayor, because it depends on what the town decides to do. But what we'll do is we'll take a look at it next year. And depending on which direction we go, the idea is that either we will then merge the contracts together, but it really is right now a little premature because we're not quite sure which direction. So.
All right, all right. Okay. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then we also need to, Craig, if I'm understanding what you described, we also need to agree to extend the existing code enforcement contract for 1 year.
Yes, sir.
That's the next item on the agenda, Mr. Moffett.
That's item
It's
6.
separated, 2 separate items. That'll be item D.
Right.
Could I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
So move.
Second. Okay, any discussion on this? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. Thank you. And thank you,
Mr.
Mike
Parent.
and Rob and Craig for working so hard. We had a good discussion on this at the Ways and Means Committee, but it's a complicated issue. We put them together and then tried to take them apart again. So thank you for the time to do this.
Thank you.
Okay, tab 7, item E, to consider approval of planning commission appointment. John, is that you?
Yes, I'm not sure if Mr. Taylor's on, but Mr. Moffett, would you like to address this, or would you? This would be the appointment of Ms. Hennessy.
Well, I mean, it's whether or not we want Mr. Hennessy to fill the spot on the open spot on, Ms. Hennessy to fill the open spot on the planning commission. And it was recommended by the chairman of the planning commission.
I read her background and experience. She seems like she has a lot of excellent experience to apply to planning.
She's done this job in her history in other localities. So I would say she's well qualified for the position, and she would be there until 2024.
Is that a
Okay.
motion?
Yes, I so move.
Second?
So second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item F is approval of a construction board of appeals appointment.
Mr. Spikers, Bruce, are you still on? If you'd like to chime in, you're more than welcome. There you go.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'd like to present to you 2 appointees for the Construction Board of Appeals. We do have 2 vacant seats. One that was Brooks Fullerton had resigned his seat, as well as Ryan Knutzer, who we know now is the St. John's Fire Chief. Noelle Cade, who is a local architect, has agreed to fill Brooks Fullerton's seat. She's a local architect with a number of accolades and quite a extensive experience in design, both on a federal level, state level, and local level. And the second seat, Chris Wilhoit, who is the fire marshal for St. John's, has agreed to fill that seat if appointed, and there again brings a lot of experience from the fire side as well as the building code side. Both of these individuals have extensive experience in building sciences and would be a true asset for the Construction Board of Appeals with your approval. If there's any questions, I'll be open to any questions at this time.
Thanks, Bruce.
I move the recommendations presented by Bruce.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Item-
And Bruce, I'm going to bring you back on during town administrator's report, so go ahead and turn your video off, but just don't leave. Thanks. You can go ahead
Item
and turn your
G
video off.
is to consider approval on the Arts and Cultural Events Council Charter.
And Stephanie, if you'd like to turn your video on.
So what you have before you is staff suggested changes to their charter regarding their organization. They've gone through several different structural changes, and staff believes that as following suit with some of the other committees, that moving towards the staff chaired positions. And so what you have before you are those changes. Also, with the addition of a full-time events coordinator to deal with some of the logistics that volunteers currently manage, those changes are also reflected here.
Very good, very good. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
I so move.
Second.
Sure, second.
Any comments, discussion, questions of Stephanie?
No, I've been the liaison to this council, and it's amazing how much work, well, it's not amazing. There is so much work involved in presenting our program every year. And I think this move really makes a lot of sense, because the other people are volunteers and they don't always have the coordination efforts and that are required to make a successful program. So I support Stephanie's recommendation.
Very good. Very good. Remarkable group that provides so much to this
It
community.
is. It really is.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. H, committee appointments. Oh. Did we just do that?
No, this
No,
this
sir.
is
This is
gonna
for
be-
Arts and Council.
This is for 3 committees: Arts Council, Audit, and State Aid Tax Committees.
Oh, okay. Well, take them one at a time, or all 3. Could I have a motion to approve the Arts and Cultural Events Council for 2022?
So move.
Second.
Okay. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The audit committee, I guess there's a new member, Mrs. Hollett. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And SATAX, Mr. Ellis and Mrs. Rush. Could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our new business. Stephanie, your report.
Yes, Mayor. I just wanted to give you guys just some updates. Bruce, are you still on?
Yes.
Okay, Bruce, could you turn your video on, please? If you might, could you just give them a couple updates just on the senior living and the Cape?
Okay, I'll start with the senior living facility first. Spoke with Dan Sykes, who is the lead architect on the senior living facility project. We spoke last Friday. They have sold off a number of their units, and that's what they've been working towards prior to getting construction started. The goal currently is for them to submit complete structural drawings for foundation only permits in April of this year. with the complete design package being submitted either latter part of fourth quarter this year, possibly worst case scenario January next year. The completion date for the project is pushed to 2024. And there again, they're looking at second or third quarter 2024 for completion. The Cape project is underway, as you all know. We are still doing a lot of foundation work and some what they call tower work, so elevator shafts, that kind of thing, stairwells. That is still ongoing right now. Things have been going pretty smooth in that regard. Just issued a permit for the fire mains for the buildings to get that underway. The Cape project is slated to be completed, barring any construction delays, 2023, I believe, fourth quarter for completion date. At the present time, we still do not have any submittals for the beach club portion of that building, which includes 2 cottages. Still waiting to see that, and don't have any information as to when that may be submitted. And that's pretty much in a nutshell if you have any questions.
Bruce, with the senior living center, when the foundation permits are arrived and approved, is that when fill dirt will start coming in to raise that site elevation, or will that start before then?
It will start before then.
So
they will actually be bringing in fill dirt from February to June.
Okay.
There is surcharging in between the lifts, if you will. I believe it's a 28-day surcharge for each lift, so it's kind of a long process. In that time frame, they're also going to be installing the earthquake drains for that building, and that's their schedule as it stands for right now.
What is the 38-day lift? What does that mean?
That's the layers of dirt that they're bringing in to elevate that site. So for each layer, they have to wait 28 days for it to surcharge, and they move to the next lift.
Very good. Thank you.
Bruce, the fellow that you had talked with at the senior center, what was his confidence level? I remember that they needed to hit a target of sales before or target of purchases for their units before they really proceeded. Are they near there, or he feels pretty confident that the time frame he's giving you is a good, they'll achieve? Or
in all honesty, Mayor, he didn't sound very optimistic. Just in the way he said, we've sold off some units. I didn't, for lack of a cliche, I didn't get the warm and fuzzies about the project, to be honest. I still think there's some financial obligations that haven't been met there. And I don't know that to be a fact. It's just a feeling I have.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Oh, any other questions of Bruce? Right, thank you, Bruce. You're welcome. For our town projects, which is the garage, Kestrel Court, and landscape, the garage is moving right along. The completion date still, I'm guessing, still slated towards, I believe, the mid or towards the end of this month. Kestrel Court, we're still working on that. We've received some things from Carolina Waste that we've been waiting for. So our LS3P should be able to now move forward with completing the design aspect of it. And then the landscape piece, we have our new landscapers are on board, our teaks. And if you've been here, you've seen that they've done work with regards to just pulling out stuff that is dead. And so we are humming right along with regards to that work. That's all I have to report now, unless there's anything specific that you'd like to ask.
Stephanie, just to remind everybody, when's Kestrel Court to be completed?
We're really far behind on that, so I couldn't give you a timeline right now. Hopefully it'll be before the peak of the season, before April, because there's not very much to it. But once we get the drawings, which will be about 3 weeks, then hopefully, and then we have, of course, the lease agreement signed by KIU. They should be able to start work in March, and then hopefully be done by May, if sooner.
Okay. Any other questions of Stephanie?
No, Mayor.
Committee updates? Any committee updates? Mary Ann? Anything?
I'm not sure if this is appropriate or not. I'd like to make a statement about the applications we've been getting for land changes. Can I do that?
I'm sorry, I missed that. For what, Mary Ann?
For development, the applications that we received regarding the beach walker properties.
About what? Are you talking about the annexation or Upper Beach Walker?
Upper Beach Walker.
We haven't received any application yet, but you just want to comment on the general comments?
Yes, I would like
Okay.
to make a general comment.
Okay.
I've been thinking a lot about the beach walker properties and also any other properties that come in for our consideration as a council. And there's always a common theme. If you read the letters from residents and also the meetings, we always hear about the consistent issue of traffic and the impact of traffic and the developments on these, the development impact on traffic. I really feel that as a council, I would ask my fellow council members to consider this, that we should not move forward with anything until we have the beach walker plans identified and implemented. Because it's so hard to say, well, traffic's going to increase, but we don't know yet what's going to happen after we have this beach walker plan implemented. And that I would also include with that any security changes that might take place, because I know that's under discussion. And I really feel that it's very hard to make decisions on these other properties without knowing that. Thank you.
Well, I'll just tag team in on with Mary Ann, because I've been having similar thoughts that perhaps in terms of, now I recognize that developers haven't submitted an amendment agreement yet,
Right.
but I would kind of like to see what the impact of the development of the Cape and the Beach Club and the build out on parcel 13 looks like before we move forward with anything. Because I would just like to have tangible visual proof of what that looks like. So I've had similar thoughts.
Good.
I would go along with that thought as well, because in addition, it also seems that what is ultimately asked for with a piece of property is different than what was initially asked for, and the impact of that and the I'll say ulterior motives or whatever it is to change their plans. Just I think it's not a good way to do business, and
Right.
I think we need to kind of slow down, take on a little bit of wait and see attitude with the things that are already underway. You know, Kika's now got a request in front of them to change what goes on lot 1, which will in fact impact the traffic both inside the gate and
Right.
Beach Walker Drive. So, you know, I'm with Mary Ann and Scott that we need to maybe take a little moratorium on changing more land applications. Just a thought.
I know when I received one of them, I said to Stephanie or John Taylor, how does this impact Beach Walker, the work that we're doing on Beach Walker? It seems like we're trying to do the cart before the horse before the cart, or cart before the horse.
We got something out of order anyway.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, okay. I think we're going to get our opportunity based upon my conversation with Mark, somewhere in the near future,
Mhm.
we're going to be presented with that. So we'll have the
Okay.
opportunity to discuss it at that time.
Yep.
There's no question it's a very active street. Any other comments, Marianne?
No, just by waiting on this, though, some other work can be done, which is what we've been requesting as far as planning goes for the for Mark and anyone else involved. But anyhow, my basic premise is I don't think until we get the beach walker situation straightened out that we really shouldn't make decisions on other requests.
But that, just so I understand, that is the only other request. There are
Right. I was just thinking of the other Andel property that we had, even though that's active.
I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't concern, yeah. I mean, the only one that's pending, not even pending, but you know, that's
out there
is Permarsh
Walker.
Beach Walker, yeah.
Right.
Well, that's not entirely true. There's also one at Kika to change the
Yes.
access to the lot number one, which in a way affects what we may or may not do with the other piece of property. So, you know, I guess Marianne, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's almost like you're saying, let's just slow down, take it easy, make sure we make good decisions along the way rather than fast decisions.
That's how I feel. Thank you, John.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Scott, anything?
I have nothing more.
John?
So Stephanie did my public works update, so I won't do that.
No, please go ahead. Do more.
Thank you. So I'll just talk about noise.
Oh, that's a good one.
So at the mayor's request, we established this ad hoc noise working group. And largely because of some scheduling difficulties I had, we haven't yet had our first meeting, but we do have it scheduled for this Friday, the 4th. It's going to be at 1 o'clock. It's going to be a Zoom call. And we have a really good group of people on this committee or work in this work group. So Brian Gerard is going to represent the resort. He's the director of golf. Carl Ritchie, who is the Kika security director, he's going to represent Kika's point of view. Interestingly, Carl is also on the Mount Pleasant Town Council, and their town council is also struggling with a noise ordinance right now. So he's well acquainted with this discussion. Mike Sosnowski is going to represent Craig's point of view as the nighttime code enforcement officer. And then we have 4 citizen members: Doug Benham, Harry Bell, Michael Heidingsfelter, and Lynn Schroeder. And interestingly, where each of those folks live is from Ocean Park, kind of in quarters, all the way down to West Beach. And so their exposure to different types of noise is pretty varied. We've also done some preliminary research on the kinds of complaints we've had. Where do they come from? What are they complaining about? Over the last 2 years, we've got some good data points on that. I got Carl to go and give me the same things for when noise complaints are recorded at the gate rather than our enforcement officers. I had one of the communities that's always been touted as being very similar to us is Sea Island, Georgia. I had about a 45-minute discussion yesterday with the director of security and assistant director of security at Sea Island, and the way they handle noise. And since they're not a municipality, they have Glenn County, Georgia, that has a noise ordinance, but then they also have procedures that they follow within their resort. That's been very helpful. And then Stephanie gave me a contact at Palmetto Bluff, which is another one that's been touted as being very similar to us. I'll probably talk to him either this afternoon or tomorrow. And the charge on Friday is to identify in our proposed ordinance areas that as a group we feel are not clearly stated. And I suppose that if we have areas that people feel like are just not addressed properly, we'll identify those as well. And then ultimately to come back to you, Mr. Mayor, on recommendations on what we can do to clarify things so that it removes ambiguity, makes it easier to enforce by our code enforcement people. And also if there's an approach that we think might be a better approach than I'll say than decibels, then maybe we suggest that. So, we'll see. Friday's going to be an interesting meeting. We have very diverse group of personalities on this committee. So
Great.
Stephanie's also going to sit in as referee. So, but it'll be good. We'll get started Friday and we'll probably meet once a week or every 10 days or so until we get to a conclusion.
Do you have a timeline in which you think you would present something to the town and to the mayor?
I would hope that we will after our meeting on Friday, Scott. I would be honest with you, I'd like to do it by the end of the day Friday, but I don't think that's going to be possible.
Okay.
But I would say if we have a couple of meetings, one to identify things and then do some work and then have another meeting to kind of develop a plan, it ought to be shortly thereafter.
Okay. So do you think it would be reasonable to expect it in the March town council meeting?
Certainly April, but a lot depends on how quickly you can get things put to bed.
Well, John, my thanks to you. I mean, this is
this
is a tough subject. It's just a tough subject.
I will say, I spent a fair amount of time talking with Stephanie about kind of the approach and so forth, and then looking at all of this material that Joe Wilson had put together when we first started this, and then talking to Carl about the Mount Pleasant efforts, and then yesterday with the Sea Island guys. It is not. Nobody has an easy time with it.
Right.
No.
It's amazing.
Right. And I think our situation is exacerbated because of venues that others may not have,
Well, just to give you a quick example, the fellow I talked to yesterday at Sea Island, he said, their biggest complaint is the use of the venues. And he said the people that are complaining are the resort guests, because the people are in their rooms and the courtyard immediately below their room is having a party. Well, he said, what are you going to do? It's 8 o'clock at night. That's not considered their quiet time. So and they don't have that same residential component that we have, like we have it, where it's all spread out. Their cottages, which is Sea Island talk for mansion, are off to one end of the island, and then the resort is at the other end. And there's not this huge overlap of spaces like we would have with, let's just say, the Ocean Course and Ocean Park, or Mingo Point and Inlet Cove. And they don't have that kind of overlap of space. And so the noise carry is not the same for them. And then they don't have short-term rentals like we have short-term rentals. If you want to rent your cottage, the vast majority, he said, there's just a handful of people that go through third-party agencies, but almost all of them go into the Cloister cottage rental program. And so it's really just considered an extension of the resort in that sense. It's not like we think of short-term rentals. So it's an interesting dilemma that they have. And then they, like he said, because they're not a municipality, when they do get a complaint, his words, we have to handle it with 5-star hospitality practices. They're all the people complaining and the people making the noise typically are resort guests. And so, they've paid a lot of money to be there, and they have to be careful. But he did say that if they go back to the same place a second time, they're a little more stern. And they tell them at that second time that if we have to come again, we will come with a Glenn County police officer. And by then it's out of the resort's hands. And so he said they generally get compliance after the first time, but almost guaranteed after the second visit. So it's a little different situation, but we'll see. So anyway, anybody who wants to attend the meeting on Friday, you're welcome to sit in and listen. So we'll see.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Stephanie, any other remaining citizen comments?
If there's any of the attendees, the citizens that want to speak to the citizens' comments portion of the agenda, please use the raise hand option. Seeing none.
Okay, thank you both. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Take care, everybody.